Philip David Charles Collins is an English drummer, singer, songwriter, record producer, and actor. He was the drummer and lead singer of the rock band Genesis and also has a career as a solo performer. Between 1982 and 1990, Collins scored 3 UK and 7 US #1 singles as a solo artist. When his work with Genesis, his work with other artists, as well as his solo career is totaled, he had more US top 40 singles than any other artist during the 1980s. His most successful singles from the period include In the Air Tonight, Against All Odds, One More Night, and Another Day in Paradise. Born and brought up in West London, Collins played drums from the age of 5 and completed drama school training, which secured him various roles as a child actor, with his first major role, aged 13, as the Artful Dodger in the West End musical Oliver. He then pursued a music career, joining Genesis in 1970 as their drummer and becoming lead singer in 1975 following the departure of Peter Gabriel. Collins began a successful solo career in the 1980s, initially inspired by his marital breakdown and love of soul music, releasing the albums Face Value, Hello, I Must Be Going, No Jacket Required and But Seriously. Collins became, in the words of AllMusic, one of the most successful pop and adult contemporary singers of the 80s and beyond. He also became known for a distinctive gated reverb drum sound on many of his recordings. In 1985, he was the only artist to perform at both Live Aid concerts. He also resumed his acting career, appearing in Miami Vice and subsequently starring in the film Buster. In 1996, Collins left Genesis to focus on solo work. This included writing songs for Disney's Tarzan, for which he received an Oscar for Best Original Song for You'll Be in My Heart. He rejoined Genesis for their Turn It On Again tour in 2007. Following a 5-year retirement to focus on his family life, Collins released an autobiography in 2016 and completed his Not Dead Yet tour in 2019. He then rejoined Genesis in 2020 for a second reunion tour, ending in March 2022. Collins's discography includes 8 studio albums that have sold 33.5 million certified units in the US and an estimated 150 million records sold worldwide, making him one of the world's best-selling artists. He is one of only 3 recording artists, along with Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, who have sold over 100 million records both as solo artists and separately as principal members of a band. He has won 8 Grammy Awards, 6 Brit Awards, 2 Golden Globe Awards, 1 Academy Award, and a Disney Legend Award. He was awarded 6 Ivor Novello Awards from the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers, and Authors, including the International Achievement Award. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1999, and was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2003 and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Genesis in 2010. He has also been recognized by music publications with induction into the Modern Drummer Hall of Fame in 2012, and the Classic Drummer Hall of Fame in 2013. Early life. Philip David Charles Collins was born on January 30, 1951 in Putney Hospital, South West London. His father, Greville Philip Austin Collins, was an insurance agent for London Assurance, and his mother, Winifred June Collins, worked in a toy shop and later as a booking agent at the Barbara Speake Stage School, an independent performing arts school in East Acton. Collins is the youngest of 3 children. His sister Carol competed as a professional ice skater and followed her mother's footsteps as a theatrical agent, and his brother Clive was a noted cartoonist. The family moved twice by the time Collins had reached 2. They settled at 453 Hanworth Road in Hounslow, Middlesex. Collins was given a toy drum kit for Christmas when he was 5, and later his 2 uncles made him a makeshift set with triangles and tambourines that fit into a suitcase. As Collins grew older, these were followed by more complete sets bought by his parents. He practiced by playing along to music on the television and radio. During a family holiday at a Butlins, a 7-year-old Collins entered a talent contest singing the ballad of Davy Crockett, but stopped the orchestra halfway through to tell them they were in the wrong key. The Beatles were a major early influence on Collins, including their drummer Ringo Starr. He also followed the lesser-known London band The Action, whose drummer he would copy and whose work introduced him to the soul music of Motown and Stax Records. Collins was also influenced by jazz and big band drummer Buddy Rich, whose opinion on the importance of the hi-hat prompted him to stop using 2 bass drums and start using the hi-hat. Around 12, Collins received basic piano and music tuition from his father's aunt. He studied drum rudiments from Lloyd Ryan and later under Frank King, and considered this training as more helpful than anything else because they're used all the time. In any kind of funk or jazz drumming, the rudiments are always there. Collins never learned to read or write musical notation and devised his own system, which he regretted in later life. "I've always felt that if I could hum it, I could play it. For me, that was good enough, but that attitude is bad." Collins attended Nelson Primary School until he was 11 years old. He was accepted into Chiswick County Grammar School, where he took to football and formed The Real Thing, a school band that had Andrea Bertarelli, his future wife, and friend Lavinia Lang, as backup singers. Both women would have an impact on Collins' personal life in later years. Collins' next group was the Freehold, with whom he wrote his first song, Lying, Crying, Dying, and played in a group named The Charge. Career 1963–1970, early acting roles and bands. Collins quit school at 14 to become a full-time pupil at Barbara Speake. He had an uncredited part as an extra in the Beatles' film A Hard Day's Night, where he is amongst the screaming teenagers during the television concert sequence. Later in 1964, Collins was cast as the Artful Dodger in 2 West End runs of the musical Oliver. He was paid £15 a week, and called the role the best part for a kid in all London. His days as the Dodger were numbered when his voice broke during a performance and had to speak his lines for the rest of the show. Collins starred in Calamity the Cow, a film produced by the Children's Film Foundation. After a falling out with the director, Collins decided to quit acting to pursue music. He was to appear in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang as one of the children who storm the castle, but his scene was cut. Collins auditioned for the role of Romeo in Romeo and Juliet, but the role went to Leonard Whiting. He also traveled the country teaching people the crunch dance made popular by a Smith's Crisps advertising campaign. Collins's enthusiasm towards music grew during his acting years. He frequented the Marquee Club on Wardour Street so often, eventually the managers asked him to set out the chairs, sweep the floors, and assist in the cloakroom. It was here where Collins saw the Action and newcomers Yes perform, which greatly influenced him. When auditions for Vinegar Joe and Manfred Mann Chapter 3 were unsuccessful, Collins secured a position in the Cliff Charles Blues Band and toured the country. This was followed by a stint in the Gladiators, a backing band for a black vocal quartet, which also featured Collins's schoolmate Ronnie Carroll on guitar. Around this time, Collins learned that Yes were looking for a new drummer and spoke to frontman John Anderson, who invited him to an audition the following week. Collins failed to turn up, and later wondered what his life would have been like had he gone ahead with it. In 1969, Collins and Carroll joined John Walker's backing band for a European tour, which also consisted of guitarist Gordon Smith and keyboardist Brian Chatton. The tour finished, the quartet formed a rock band, Hickory, which they later renamed Flaming Youth. They signed to Fontana Records and recorded Arc 2, a concept album written and produced by Ken Howard and Alan Blakely that tells the story of man's evacuation from a burning Earth and its voyage into space. Inspired by the 1969 moon landing, each member sings a lead vocal. In May 1970, after Flaming Youth split, Collins played congas on George Harrison's song Art of Dying, but his contribution was omitted. Years later, Collins asked Harrison about the omission. Harrison sent Collins a recording allegedly containing Collins's performance. Collins was embarrassed to hear that the performance was poor. When Collins apologized, Harrison confessed that the recording was a prank, which Collins accepted in good humor. 1970–1978, Genesis, later role as lead singer, and Brand X. In July 1970, the rock band Genesis had signed with Charisma Records and recorded their second album Trespass, but suffered a setback following the departures of drummer John Mayhew and guitarist Anthony Phillips. They decided to continue, and placed an advert in the Melody Maker for a drummer sensitive to acoustic music and a 12-string acoustic guitarist. Collins recognized Charisma owner Tony Stratton-Smith's name on it, and he and Carroll went for the auditions. The group, who had been a full-time working band for less than a year, consisted of school friends from Charterhouse School, a private boarding school, singer Peter Gabriel, keyboardist Tony Banks, and bassist/guitarist Mike Rutherford. Collins and Carroll arrived early, so Collins took a swim in the pool at Gabriel's parents' house and memorized the pieces the drummers before him were playing. He recalled, "They put on Trespass, and my initial impression was of a very soft and round music, not edgy, with vocal harmonies, and I came away thinking Crosby, Stills and Nash." On August 8, 1970, Collins became their fifth drummer. Genesis then took a 2-week holiday, during which Collins earned money as an exterior decorator. Rutherford thought Carroll was not a good fit. In 1971, the band enlisted Steve Hackett. From 1970 to 1975, Collins played drums, percussion, and largely sang backing vocals on Genesis albums and concerts. His first album as a member, Nursery Creme, features the acoustic song For Absent Friends that has Collins singing lead vocal. He sang More Fool Me on their 1973 album Selling England by the Pound. In 1974, during the recording of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Collins played drums on Brian Eno's second album Taking Tiger Mountain after Eno had contributed electronic effects to 2 songs on the album. In August 1975, Gabriel's departure from the band was publicly announced. Genesis advertised for a replacement in Melody Maker and received around 400 replies. After a lengthy auditioning process, during which he sang backup vocals for applicants, Collins became the band's lead vocalist during the recording of their album A Trick of the Tail. The album was a commercial and critical success, reaching number 3 in the UK charts and 31 in the US. Rolling Stone wrote that Genesis has managed to turn the possible catastrophe of Gabriel's departure into their first broad-based American success. For the tour, Collins accepted former Yes and King Crimson drummer Bill Bruford to play drums while Collins sang. Wind and Wuthering was the last Genesis album recorded with Hackett before he left the group. In 1976, Collins brought in American drummer Chester Thompson, formerly of Frank Zappa and Weather Report, who became a mainstay of Genesis and Collins' backing bands until 2010. When Collins, Banks, and Rutherford decided to continue Genesis as a trio in 1977, they recorded, and then there were 3. This marked a shift from their progressive rock roots to a more radio-friendly, pop rock sound, and included the band's first UK Top 10 and US Top 40 single, Follow You Follow Me. The level of commercial success that Genesis had reached by this time allowed Collins and his wife to move into Old Croft, a home in Shalford, Surrey, in the spring of 1978. Collins pursued various guest spots and solo projects from his time as Genesis's drummer. In 1973, he and Hackett were among the musicians that performed on the solo debut of ex-Yes guitarist Peter Banks. In 1975, Collins sang and played drums, vibraphone, and percussion on Hackett's first solo album, Voyage of the Acolyte, performed on Eno's albums Another Green World, Before and After Science, and Music for Films, and replaced drummer Phil Spinelli of the jazz fusion group Brand X before recording their first two albums, Unorthodox Behavior and Moroccan Roll. Collins played percussion on Johnny the Fox by Thin Lizzy, and sang on Anthony Phillips' debut solo album, The Geese and the Ghost. 1978–1984, solo debut with I Face Value /I and I Hello, I Must Be Going, /I. None. 1984–1989, I Know Jacket Required /I and Commercial Ubiquity. None. 1989–1996, But Seriously I Both Sides I, and Leaving Genesis. None. 1996–2006, Phil Collins Big Band, I Dance Into the Light I, Disney Work, and I Testify I. None. 2006–2015, First Genesis Reunion, I Going Back I, and Retirement. None. 2015 Present, Out of Retirement, Not Dead Yet Tour, and Second Genesis Reunion. In May 2015, Collins signed a deal with Warner Music Group to have his solo albums remastered and reissued with previously unreleased material. In October of that year, he announced that he was no longer retired and had started plans to tour and make a new album. By mid-2016, all 8 of his albums were reissued with the artwork updated to display Collins as his older self, the exception being Going Back, which had a new cover. In 2019, the additional digital-only releases Other Sides and Remixed Sides followed. In October 2016, Collins' autobiography Not Dead Yet was published. At a press conference held at the Royal Albert Hall in the same month, Collins announced his Not Dead Yet tour, which initially took form as a short European trek from June 2017. The tour included 5 nights at the Royal Albert Hall, which sold out in 15 seconds, prompting the announcement of Collins' headline spot at the 2017 BST Hyde Park Festival, which became his largest solo concert. His band included his son Nicholas on the drums. A review in The Telegraph stated, "Unlike the body, the voice is largely unravaged by time. It's still soulful, sometimes silky, occasionally bruised." In 2017, the tour was extended worldwide and ran until October 2019 for a total of 97 shows. In March 2020, Collins, Banks, and Rutherford announced they had reformed Genesis once more to undertake the Last Domino tour. This time the band were joined by Collins' son Nick on the drums, leaving his father to handle lead vocals. After the tour was rescheduled twice due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it began in September 2021 and finished in London on March 26, 2022. At the last show, at the O2 Arena in London, Collins said on stage, "It's the last show for Genesis. Drumming and Influence." In his book on the legends who defined progressive rock drumming, American drummer Rich Lakowski wrote, "Phil Collins's grooves in early Genesis recordings paved the way for many talented drummers to come. His ability to make the drums bark with musicality and to communicate so convincingly in odd time signatures left many a drummer tossing on the headphones and playing along to Phil's lead." In 2014, readers of Rhythm voted Collins the 4th most influential progressive rock drummer for his work on the 1974 Genesis album The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. In 2015, Music Radar named Collins one of the 6 pioneers of progressive rock drumming. In 2005, Planet Rock listeners voted Collins the 5th greatest rock drummer in history. Collins was ranked 10th in the Greatest Drummers of All Time list by Gigwise and number 9 in a list of the 20 greatest drummers of the last 25 years by Music Radar in 2010. In 1987, Collins looked back at his fast playing in Brand X and early Genesis. "I actually can't play like that anymore." Late Foo Fighters drummer Taylor Hawkins cited Collins as one of his drumming heroes. He said, "Collins is an incredible drummer. Anyone who wants to be good on the drums should check him out. The man is a master." In the April 2001 issue of Modern Drummer, Dream Theater drummer Mike Portnoy named Collins in an interview when asked about drummers he was influenced by and had respect for. In another conversation in 2014, Portnoy lauded his amazing progressive drumming back in the early and mid-1970s. Rush drummer Neil Peart praised his beautiful drumming and lovely sound on the 1973 Genesis album Selling England by the Pound, which he called an enduring masterpiece of drumming. Marco Minman, drummer for artists including Joe Satriani and Steven Wilson, described Collins as brilliant for the way he composes his parts, and the sounds he gets. He said, "Phil is almost like John Bonham to me. I hear his personality, his perspective." He singled out the drumming on In the Air Tonight as an example of 10 notes that everybody knows and concluded Phil is an insanely talented drummer. Other drummers who have cited him as an influence or expressed admiration for his drumming work are Bran Daler of Mastodon, Nick DiVirgilio of Spock's Beard and Big Big Train, Jimmy Keegan of Spock's Beard, Matt Mingus of Dance Gavin Dance, John Merriman of Cephalic Carnage, Craig Blundell of Steven Wilson and Frost *, and Charlie Bennett of Anthrax. According to Jason Bonham, his father respected Phil Collins' drumming very much and one of his favorite songs was Genesis' Turn It On Again, which he used to love playing with him. Modern Drummer readers voted for Collins every year between 1987 and 1991 as pop/mainstream rock drummer of the year. In 2000, he was voted as Big Band Drummer of the Year. In 2012, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Equipment. Collins is a left-handed drummer, and uses Gretsch drums, Noble and Cooley solid snare drums, Remo heads, Sabian cymbals, and he uses his signature ProMark sticks. Past kits he used were made by Pearl and Premier. Other instruments associated with Collins's sound include the Roland TR-808, Roland TR-909, the Simmons SDSV electronic drum set, and the Lindrum drum machines. Collins also used a Roland CR-78, Sequential Circuits Prophet 5 synthesizer, Fender Rhodes electric piano, and a vocoder for his voice. Other Korg instruments include the Wave Station, the Karma, and the Trinity. Cameo film and television appearances. Collins had cameo appearances in Steven Spielberg's Hook and the AIDS docudrama and the band played on. He starred in Frauds, which competed for the Palme d'Or at the 1993 Cannes Film Festival. He supplied voices to 2 animated features, Amblin's Balto and Disney's The Jungle Book 2. A long-discussed but never completed project was a film titled The Three Bears, originally meant to star Collins, Danny DeVito, and Bob Hoskins. He often mentioned the film, though an appropriate script never materialized. Collins's music is featured in the satirical black comedy film American Psycho, with psychotic lead character Patrick Bateman portrayed as an obsessive fan who reads deep meaning into his work, especially with Genesis, while describing his solo music as more commercial and therefore more satisfying, in a narrower way. Bateman delivers a monologue praising Collins and Genesis during a sequence in which he engages the services of 2 prostitutes while playing in Too Deep and Sussudio. Collins told the New Musical Express, "I don't think him being a psychopath and liking my music is linked. My music was just omnipresent in that era." During the 1980s, Collins was among the celebrities caricatured on the satirical television puppet show Spitting Image. The show's creators were then commissioned by Genesis to create puppets of the entire band to appear in their 1986 music video Land of Confusion. Collins twice hosted the Billboard Music Awards on television, which were produced and directed by his longtime music video and TV special collaborators, Paul Flattery and Jim Yukich of FYI. He also appeared in an episode of the series Miami Vice, entitled Phil the Shill, in which he plays a cheating con man. In the 1980s he appeared in several comedy sketches with the two Ronnies on BBC One. In 2001, Collins was one of several celebrities who were tricked into appearing in a controversial British comedy series, Brass Eye, shown on public service broadcaster Channel 4. In the episode, Collins endorsed a hoax anti-pedophile campaign wearing a t-shirt with the words nonsense and warned children against speaking to suspicious people. Collins was reported by the BBC to have consulted lawyers regarding the program, which was originally pulled from broadcast but eventually rescheduled. Collins said he had taken part in the program in good faith for the public benefit, believing it to be a public service program that would be going around schools and colleges in a bid to stem child abduction and abuse. Collins also accused the makers of the program of some serious taste problems and warned it would prevent celebrities from supporting public-spirited causes in the future. In 2006, Collins played a fictional version of himself in the PSP and PS2 video game Grand Theft Auto: Vice City Stories. Set in 1984, he appears in 3 missions in which the main character, Victor, must save him from mafia-hired hitmen, who are trying to kill Collins because his manager refused to pay his $3 million debt to them. The final mission occurs during his concert, where the player must defend the scaffolding against saboteurs while Collins is performing In the Air Tonight. After this, the player is given the opportunity to watch this performance of In the Air Tonight for the cost of $6,000 in-game dollars. In the Air Tonight is part of the official Vice City Stories soundtrack, and can be also heard on the in-game radio station Emotion 98.3. The song has also been featured in films such as Aqua Teen Hunger Force: movie film for theaters and The Hangover. In the Air Tonight featured in the 2007 Gorilla commercial for Cadbury's Dairy Milk Chocolate. Many believed that Collins himself was the drummer. When asked about Gorilla, Collins jokingly commented that not only is he a better drummer than me, he also has more hair. Can he sing too? The advertisement, which won gold at the British Television Advertising Awards in 2008, helped the song re-enter the New Zealand Ryan's singles chart at number 3 in July 2008, the following week reaching number 1, beating its original 1981 number 6 peak. In the Air Tonight was also sampled in the song I Can Feel It on Sean Kingston's self-titled debut album. Collins was portrayed in the cartoon South Park in the episode Timmy 2000 holding his Oscar throughout, referring to his 1999 win for You'll Be in My Heart, which defeated Blame Canada from South Park, Bigger, Longer and Uncut. The show's creators admitted resenting losing to Collins, as they felt their other competitors were more worthy. The episode Cartman's Silly Hate Crime 2000 involves a sled race down the landmark known as Phil Collins Hill, which has an impression of Collins' face in the side. The Phil Collins character returns once more and gets killed off in the episode 200. Collins appears briefly in the Finnish animated sitcom Pasila in the episode Phil Collins' Hangover. The music of this episode is a pastiche of Collins's Another Day in Paradise. Collins was mentioned in the Psych episode Disco Didn't Die. It was murdered, as resembling Sean Spencer's father, Henry, portrayed by actor Corbin Burnson. Critical and public perceptions. Criticism. According to a 2000 BBC biography of Collins, critics sneer at him and bad publicity also caused problems, which damaged his public profile. Rock historian Martin C. Strong wrote that Collins truly polarized opinion from the start, his ubiquitous smugness and increasingly sterile pop making him a favorite target for critics. According to Guardian writer Paul Lester, Collins would regularly call music journalists to take issue with negative reviews. Over time, he came to be personally disliked. In 2009, journalist Mark Lawson told how Collins's media profile had shifted from pop's Mr. Nice Guy, patron saint of ordinary blokes, to someone accused of blandness, tax exile, and ending a marriage by sending a fax. Collins has rejected accusations of tax avoidance, and despite confirming that some of the divorce-related correspondence between him and second wife, Jill Tavelman, was by fax, he states that he did not terminate the marriage in that fashion. Nevertheless, the British media has often repeated the fax claim. Collins has been the victim of scathing remarks in regard to his alleged right-wing political leanings. Caroline Sullivan, a music critic of The Guardian, referred to his cumulative negative publicity in her 2007 article I Wish I'd Never Heard of Phil Collins, writing that it was difficult for her to hear his work without being riven by distaste for the man himself. Several critics have commented on Collins's omnipresence, especially in the 1980s and early 1990s. Journalist Frank DiGiacomo wrote a 1999 piece for New York Observer titled The Collins Menace. He said, "Even when I sought to escape the sounds in my head by turning on the TV, there would be Mr. Collins, mugging for the camera's intent on showing the world just how hard he would work to sell millions of records to millions of stupid people." In his 2010 article Love Don't Come Easy, Artists We Love to Hate, the Irish Times critic Kevin Courtney expressed similar sentiments. Naming Collins as one of the 10 most disliked pop stars in the world, he wrote, performed at Live Aid, playing first at Wembley, then flying over to Philadelphia via Concorde, just to make sure no one in the US got off lightly. By the early 1990s, Phil fatigue had really set in. Tim Chester of the New Musical Express alluded to the backlash against Collins in an article titled, "Is It Time We All Stopped Hating Phil Collins?" Chester said of the unrelenting derision he has suffered, a lot of it he brings on himself. He also said that Collins was responsible for some of the cheesiest music ever committed to acetate. Eric Hedegaard of Rolling Stone mentioned that Phil Collins' hate sites had flourished online, and acknowledged that he had been called the sellout who took Peter Gabriel's Genesis, that paragon of prog rock, and turned it into a lame-o pop act and went on to make all those super cheesy hits that really did define the 1980s. According to author Dylan Jones in his 2013 publication on 1980s popular music, many of Collins's peers despised him. Some fellow artists have made negative comments about Collins publicly. In 1990, former Pink Floyd frontman Roger Waters criticized Collins's ubiquitous nature, including his involvement in The Who's 1989 reunion tour. David Bowie dismissed some of his own 1980s output as his Phil Collins years/albums. In addition to the song's negative press from music journalists, singer-songwriter and political activist Billy Bragg criticized Collins for writing Another Day in Paradise, stating, "Phil Collins might write a song about the homeless, but if he doesn't have the action to go with it, he's just exploiting that for a subject." Oasis songwriter Noel Gallagher criticized Collins on multiple occasions, including the comment, "Just because you sell lots of records, it doesn't mean to say you're any good. Look at Phil Collins." Collins said he has at times been very down about Noel Gallagher's comments. Gallagher's brother, Oasis singer Liam, also recalled the boring Collins's chart dominance in the 1980s and stated that, by the 1990s, it was time for some real lads to get up there and take charge. Appearing on the BBC television series Room 101 in 2005, in which guests discuss their most hated things and people, Collins nominated the Gallaghers to be sent into the eponymous room. He described them as horrible and stated, they're rude and not as talented as they think they are. I won't mince words here, but they've had a go at me personally. Collins acknowledged in 2010 that he had been omnipresent. He said of his character, "The persona on stage came out of insecurity, it seems embarrassing now. I recently started transferring all my VHS tapes onto DVD to create an archive, and everything I was watching, I thought, God, I'm annoying. I appeared to be very cocky, and really I wasn't." Collins concedes his status as a figure of contempt for many people and has said that he believes this is a consequence of his music being overplayed. In 2011 he said, "The fact that people got so sick of me wasn't really my fault. It's hardly surprising that people grew to hate me. I'm sorry that it was all so successful. I honestly didn't mean it to happen like that." He described criticism of his physical appearance over the years as a cheap shot, but has acknowledged the very vocal element of Genesis fans who believe that the group sold out under his tenure as lead singer. Collins denied that his retirement in 2011 was due to negative attention and said that his statements had been taken out of context. He said, "I have ended up sounding like a tormented weirdo who thinks he was at the Alamo in another life, who feels very sorry for himself, and is retiring hurt because of the bad press over the years. None of this is true." Praise. Paul Lester of The Guardian wrote in 2013 that Collins is one of several pop acts that used to be a joke but are now being hailed as gods. Collins has become an important figure in U.S. urban music, influencing artists such as Kanye West, Alicia Keys, and Beyoncé. His songs have been sampled by various hip-hop and contemporary R&B acts, and performers including Lil Kim, Kelis, and Wu-Tang Clan co-founder Ol' Dirty Bastard covered his work on the 2001 tribute album Urban Renewal. In 2004, DCFC and Postal Service musician Ben Gibbard described Collins as a great vocalist. Collins has been championed by his contemporary, the heavy metal singer Ozzy Osbourne. David Crosby called him a dear friend who has helped him enormously. Queen guitarist Brian May called him a great guy and an amazing drummer, and Robert Plant paid tribute to him as the most spirited and positive and really encouraging force when commencing his own solo career after the breakup of Led Zeppelin. Collins has been championed by modern artists in diverse genres, including indie rock groups The 1975, Generationals, Neon Indian, Ye's Air, St. Lucia and Sleigh Bells, electronica artist Lorde, and soul singer Diane Birch, who said in 2014, "Collins walks a really fine line between being really cheesy and being really sophisticated. He can seem appalling, but at the same time, he has awesome production values and there's a particular richness to the sound. It's very proficient in the instrumentation and savvy about melodies." Genesis bandmate Mike Rutherford has praised Collins's personality, saying that he always had a bloke next door, happy-go-lucky demeanor about him, let's have a drink in the pub, crack a joke, smoke a cigarette or a joint. In 2014, ex-Genesis frontman Peter Gabriel, whom they both cross-collaborated with on some of their solo albums in the 1980s, referred to Collins as the workaholic's workaholic. He has been characterized by favorable critics as a rock god, and an artist who has remained down to earth. In the new Rolling Stone album guide, published in 2004, J.D. Considine wrote, "For a time, Phil Collins was nearly inescapable on the radio, and enormously popular with the listening public, something that made him an obvious target for critics. Despite his lumpen pop appeal, however, Collins is an incisive songwriter and resourceful musician." Tim Chester of the New Musical Express described Collins as the go-to guy for ironic appreciation and guilty pleasures and stated he was responsible for some moments of true genius. Creation Records founder Alan McGee wrote in 2009 that there was a non-ironic revival of Phil Collins happening. According to McGee, the kids don't care about indie cred anymore. To them, a great pop song is just that, a great pop song. In this time of revivals, nothing is a sacred cow anymore, and that can only be a good thing for music. Commenting on Collins's popularity with hip-hop acts, he argued, "It's not surprising. Collins is a world-class drummer whose songs immediately lend themselves to being sampled." In 2010, Gary Mills of the Quietus made an impassioned defense of Collins. "There can't be many figures in the world of pop who have inspired quite the same kind of hatred bordering on civil unrest as Collins, and there can't be too many who have shifted anything like the 150 million plus units that he's got through as a solo artist either." The disgrace of a career bogged entirely in the determined dross of no jacket required, however, is simply not justified, regardless of how Collins gained either his fortune, or his public image. David Shepard wrote for the BBC in 2010, "Granted, Collins has sometimes been guilty of painting the bullseye on his own forehead, but nonetheless, the sometime Genesis frontman's canon is so substantial and his hits so profuse that it feels myopic to dismiss him merely as a haughty purveyor of tortured, romantic ballads for the middle-income world." Rolling Stone journalist Eric Hedegaard expressed disapproval of the widespread criticism which Collins has received, suggesting that he has been unfairly and inexplicably vilified. Martin C. Strong stated in 2011 that the enigmatic and amiable Phil Collins has had his fair share of mockers and critics over the years, although one thing is sure, and that is his dexterity and undeniable talent. In a piece the following year, titled 10 Much Mocked Artists It's Time We Forgave, New Musical Express critic Anna Conrad said Collins had been portrayed as a villain, and wrote, "Was the bile really justified? Come on, admit it. You've air drummed 2 in the Air tonight, and loved it." The Guardian journalist Dave Simpson wrote a complimentary article in 2013, while acknowledging few pop figures have become as successful and yet reviled as Phil Collins. He argued it's about time we recognized Collins's vast influence as one of the godfathers of popular culture. Personal life, family and relationships. Collins has divorced 3 times. From 1975 to 1980, he was married to Canadian-born Andrea Bertarelli. They met as 11-year-old students in a London drama class and reconnected in 1974 when Genesis performed in Vancouver. They married in England when both were 24, after which Collins legally adopted Bertarelli's daughter Joelle, who became an actress and film producer. They also had a son, Simon Collins, who is the former vocalist and drummer of the progressive rock band Sound of Contact. In 2016, Bertarelli took legal action against Collins pertaining to his account of their relationship in his autobiography. In 1984, Collins married American-born Jill Tavelman. They have one daughter, Lily Collins, who became an actress. The marriage encountered problems that culminated in Collins twice having an affair with Lavinia Lang, a former drama school classmate, while touring with Genesis in 1992. The two were previously engaged, but the relationship ended before they married. In 1994, Collins openly stated that he had fallen out of love with Tavelman and had filed for divorce, which finalized in 1996. As part of the settlement, Collins paid £17 million to Tavelman. In 1999, Collins married Oriane Sevi, a Swiss national who worked as his translator at the start of his 1994 tour when she was 22. They have 2 sons, Nicholas and Matthew. They lived in the former house of Jackie Stewart in Benins, Switzerland. In 2006 they divorced. Collins paid £25 million to Sevi, which became the largest settlement in a British celebrity divorce. Collins continued to live in Fechy, Switzerland, while he also maintained homes in New York City and Dersingham, Norfolk. From 2007 to 2016, Collins was in a relationship with American news anchor Dana Tyler. In 2008, Seavey and her 2 sons moved to Miami, Florida. Collins recalled, "I went through a few bits of darkness, drinking too much. I killed my hours watching TV and drinking, and it almost killed me." He said in 2015 that he had been teetotal for 3 years. In January 2016, after moving to Miami Beach, Florida in the previous year to be closer to his 2 youngest sons, Collins reunited with Seavey and they lived together in Miami. In October 2020, Collins filed an eviction notice against Seavey after she secretly married another man in August. Collins sold his Miami home in 2021, for $39 million. Collins' brother Clive was a cartoonist. Phil appeared at his brother's investiture ceremony at Buckingham Palace in 2012 when he was awarded an MBE for services to art, with Phil stating, "I shared a bedroom with him when we were boys and he was always drawing. He used to do Christmas cards and birthday cards for the family." Wealth. In 2012, Collins was estimated to be the 2nd wealthiest drummer in the world, surpassed only by Ringo Starr. Collins was estimated to have a fortune of £120 million in the Sunday Times Rich list of 2018, making him one of the 25 wealthiest people in the British music industry. Court case. On March 29, 2000, Collins launched a case against 2 former musicians from his band to recoup £500,000 in royalties that were overpaid. Lewis Satterfield, 62, and Romley Davis, 51, claimed their contract entitled them to 0.5% of the royalties from Serious Hits. Live, a live album recorded during Collins' Seriously Live World Tour in 1990. Their claim was they were an integral part of the whole album, but Collins responded the 2 should only receive royalties from the 5 tracks in which they were involved. On April 19, 2000, the High Court in London ruled that the 2 musicians would receive no more royalty money from Phil Collins. The amount that Collins was seeking was halved, and Satterfield and Davis would not have to repay any of it. The judge agreed with Collins's argument that Satterfield and Davis should have been paid for only the 5 tracks on which they performed, including the hit Sussudio. Health. In 2000, Collins developed sudden hearing loss in his left ear following a recording session in Los Angeles. He consulted 3 doctors, who told him that there was nothing they could do and that the chance of a full recovery was slim. 2 years later, he had recovered most of his hearing. Collins later found that it was caused by a viral infection, and that it resolved after treatment. In April 2009, Collins had surgery on his upper neck, which was to correct an issue that occurred while drumming on the 2007 Genesis tour. Following the operation, he lost feeling in his fingers and could only grip drumsticks if they were taped to his hands. In 2010, Collins alluded to feelings of depression and low self-worth in recent years and said he had contemplated suicide, but he resisted for the sake of his children. In 2014, Collins said that he was still unable to play the drums and that it was not arthritis, but an undiagnosed nerve problem. In 2015, he underwent a spine operation. In 2016, he said he was still unable to drum with his left hand. His doctor advised him that if he wanted to play the drums again, he would need to practice as long as he took it step by step. In his 2016 autobiography, Collins acknowledged that he had struggled with an alcohol problem following his retirement and 3rd divorce. He also stated that he had been sober for 3 years. In January 2017, Collins said he was a type 2 diabetic and had received treatment with a hyperbaric chamber after he developed a diabetic abscess on his foot that became infected. In June 2017, Collins cancelled 2 shows after he slipped in his hotel room during the night and hit his head on a chair as he fell, resulting in stitches for a severe gash close to his eye. The fall was caused by his foot drop, developed as a result of his back operation. In 2017, Collins began to use a cane to assist with walking, and performed on stage while sitting in a chair. Honorary degrees. Collins has received several honorary degrees in recognition of his work in music and his personal interests. In 1987, he received an honorary doctorate of fine arts at Fairleigh Dickinson University. In 1991, he received an honorary doctorate of music at the Berklee College of Music. On May 12, 2012, he received an honorary doctorate of history at the McMurray University in Abilene, Texas, for his research and collection of Texas Revolution artifacts and documents. Politics. Collins has often been mentioned erroneously in the British media as being a supporter of the Conservative Party and a critic of the Labour Party. This derives from the famous article in The Sun, printed on the day of the 1992 UK general election, titled "If Kinnock wins today, will the last person to leave Britain please turn out the lights?", which stated that Collins was among several celebrities who were planning to leave Britain in the event of a Labour victory. Collins is often reported in the British press to have left the UK and moved to Switzerland in protest at the Labour Party's victory in the 1997 general election. Shortly before the 2005 election, Labour supporter Noel Gallagher was quoted, "Vote Labour. If you don't and the Tories get in, Phil Collins is threatening to come back and live here. And let's face it, none of us want that." However, Collins has since stated that although he did once claim many years earlier that he might leave Britain if most of his income was taken in tax, which was Labour Party policy at that time for top earners, he has never been a Conservative Party supporter, and he left Britain for Switzerland in 1994 purely because he started a relationship with a woman who lived there. He said of Gallagher, "I don't care if he likes my music or not. I do care if he starts telling people I'm a wanker because of my politics." It's an opinion based on an old, misunderstood quote. Despite his statement that he did not leave Britain for tax purposes, Collins was one of several wealthy figures living in tax havens who were singled out for criticism in a 2008 report by the charity Christian Aid. The Independent included Collins as one of their 10 celebrity tax exiles, erroneously repeating that he had left the country when Labour won the 1997 general election and that he threatened to return if the Conservatives won in 2005. Referring to the 1997 general election in his article Famous Men and Their Misunderstood Politics for MSN, Hugh Wilson stated, "Labour won it in a landslide, which just goes to show the influence pop stars really wield." He also wrote that Collins's reported comments and subsequent move to Switzerland led to accusations of hypocrisy since he had bemoaned the plight of the homeless in the song Another Day in Paradise, making him an easy target when future elections came round. The Paul Heaton and Jackie Abbott song When I Get Back to Blighty, from their 2014 album What Have We Become, made reference to Collins as a prisoner to his tax returns. Asked about his politics by Mark Lawson in an interview for the BBC, broadcast in 2009, Collins said, "My father was Conservative but it wasn't quite the same, I don't think, when he was alive. Politics never loomed large in our family anyway. I think the politics of the country were very different then." In a 2016 interview in The Guardian, Collins stated that talking about politics to The Sun was one of his biggest regrets. When asked whether he had ever voted Conservative, he said, "I didn't vote, actually. And that's not something I'm proud of. I was just so busy that I rarely was here." Collins is a member of the Canadian charity Artists Against Racism and has worked with them on campaigns including radio PSAs. In October 2020, Collins issued a cease and desist order to Donald Trump and his campaign for playing In the Air Tonight at a rally. Other interests. Collins has a long-standing interest in the Alamo. He has collected hundreds of artifacts related to the famous 1836 battle in San Antonio, Texas, narrated a light and sound show about the Alamo, and has spoken at related events. His passion for the Battle of the Alamo has also led him to write the book The Alamo and Beyond, A Collector's Journey, published in 2012. A short film was released in 2013 called Phil Collins and the Wild Frontier, which captures Collins on a book tour in June 2012. On June 26, 2014, a press conference was held from the Alamo, where Collins spoke, announcing that he was donating his entire collection to the Alamo via the state of Texas. On March 11, 2015, in honor of his donation, Collins was named an honorary Texan by the state legislature. Like Rod Stewart, Eric Clapton, and Neil Young, Collins is a model railway enthusiast. He also has an interest in king and country toy soldiers. Activism. Collins has performed at the Secret Policeman's Ball, a benefit show founded by Monty Python member John Cleese on behalf of Amnesty International. He made his first appearance at the 1981 show held in London's Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, and he subsequently became an activist. Collins was appointed a Lieutenant of the Royal Victorian Order in the 1994 birthday honours, in recognition of his work on behalf of the Prince's Trust, a leading UK youth charity founded by Charles, Prince of Wales, which provides training, personal development, business startup support, mentoring, and advice. Since appearing at the first Prince's Trust's rock concert in 1982, which included a performance as part of singer Kate Bush's backing band, Collins has played at the event numerous times since, most recently at the Royal Albert Hall in 2010. On April 9, 1989, Collins topped the bill at a benefit concert for the veteran English comic actor Terry Thomas. Held at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, the event raised over £75,000 for Terry Thomas and Parkinson's UK. Collins has stated he is a supporter of animal rights and people for the ethical treatment of animals. In 2005 he donated autographed drumsticks in support of PETA's campaign against Kentucky Fried Chicken. In February 2000, Collins and CV launched the Little Dreams Foundation, a non-profit organization that aims to realize the dreams of children in the fields of sports and art by providing future prodigies aged 4 to 16 years with financial, material, and mentoring support with the help of experts in various fields. Collins took the action after receiving letters from children asking him how they could break into the music industry. Mentors to the students who have benefited from his foundation include Tina Turner and Natalie Cole. In 2013, he visited Miami Beach, Florida, to promote the expansion of his foundation. Collins supports the South African charity Topsy Foundation, which provides relief services to some of South Africa's most under-resourced rural communities through a multifaceted approach to the consequences of HIV/AIDS and extreme poverty. He donates all the royalties earned from his music sales in South Africa to the organization. Awards and nominations. Discography. Studio albums. Face value. Hello, I Must Be Going. No Jacket Required. But Seriously. Both Sides. Dance Into the Light. Testify. Going Back. Concert tours. The Hello, I Must Be Going Tour. The No Jacket Required World Tour. The Seriously, Live World Tour. The Both Sides of the World Tour. The Trip Into the Light World Tour. The First Final Farewell Tour. Not Dead Yet Tour. Filmography. Film. Television. Video games. Books. The Alamo and Beyond, A Collector's Journey. Not Dead Yet, the autobiography.